A long time ago, in the underground realm, there lived a princess who dreamed of the human world. One day the princess escaped, and once outside, the brightness blinded her and erased her memory. Her body suffered the cold, sickness, and pain, and she eventually died. The king always knew that the princess's soul would return, perhaps in another body, in another place, at another time, and he would wait for her until he drew his last breath, until the world stopped turning. Now, the year is 1944. 5 years have passed since the Spanish Civil War, and the Republicans, who had lost, are still continuing to fight the fascist regime, using guerrilla warfare as their only means to survive. Our story opens with Ophelia and her sickly mother traveling to live with the captain, who has just become her stepfather. The captain has been assigned to hunt down the remaining rebels in the area, and he takes great pride in his mission. The transition has been difficult for Ophelia, as she watches her mother suffer through pregnancy, and her new father caring only for his unborn son. There is no warmth in her home, and she escapes into the fantasies of her fairy tales. But there is a glimmer of hope when a fairy leads her through the ruins of an ancient labyrinth and she meets a faun, who proclaims Ophelia to be the long-lost princess of the underground. However, in order to leave this reality behind, Ophelia will have to complete 3 trials to prove that she hasn't become immortal, and that she is, in fact, worthy of returning home. Pan's Labyrinth is a movie by Guillermo del Toro, the critically acclaimed filmmaker that's also known for The Devil's Backbone and The Shape of Water. Pan's Labyrinth is my favorite fairy tale movie, but that's mostly because I'm such a huge downer. If something like The Lord of the Rings would be considered high fantasy, something that abandons realism completely, this is what you would call low fantasy. It takes place in our world as we know it, but with light fantasy elements. Alongside all the torture and murder, we have magic, witnessed only by a little girl, who is just as much a prisoner as anyone else in this horrible situation. It would be perfectly reasonable to assume that everything happening to Ophelia is completely in her head, a way to escape the misery and the nightmare that she's trapped in. The trials she is given are tests of human nature. She must be disobedient to her elders, and follow the rules given by the faun. This is her path to salvation, and failing this means being left behind, left to the monsters that shelter her. Ophelia's trials are filled with unforgettable fantasy elements, but it's good to keep in mind this is only half a fantasy. All of the unsettling fantasy in this movie mirrors the real-life horrors happening around them. This is very much a war film. Most of it's going to be people struggling to survive in impossible situations, under the nose of the captain. And you're going to see a lot more ugliness and humanity than you'll see from this movie's creatures. Immediately after arriving and meeting the faun, she's given a book that can show the future and reveal what tasks she must complete. The first task is to climb into an old tree that is home to a giant gluttonous toad. She has to place 3 rocks into its stomach and retrieve the key from inside. Now, the task itself is easy enough, but it's certainly gross enough too, and the timing couldn't be worse. The captain has guests attending for a feast, and Ophelia was to wear a dress made by her mother, along with a brand new pair of shoes. And by the time she's completed the task, she has been declared missing, and everything has been ruined. It's one thing to break her mother's heart, but it's another thing altogether to disrespect the captain. After this, her mom starts to have bigger complications, foretold by Ophelia's magic book. And the faun gives Ophelia a mandrake root. If she submerges it in fresh milk and adds 2 drops of blood under her mother's bed, she'll heal. Next, she's given a piece of chalk, and using that to create a magical doorway. She'll need the key from the toad's stomach to reach the next treasure. It's guarded by something not human. All we do know is that it devours children. All she has to do is retrieve the dagger, don't steal anything else, and get back before the hourglass runs out, which would seal her inside. Well, who's going to notice a couple grapes? The Pale Man awakens with one of the coolest, scariest monster designs I've ever seen, which has been a bit ruined for me once people started pointing out that it resembles Mitch McConnell. It tears apart two of the fairies and chases Ophelia, and it's really quite frightening. But she escapes, and she might never sleep again, but hey, she got a dagger out of it. When the faun finds out that Ophelia broke the rules, he totally flips out. He forbids her from attempting the final trial and dooms her to this horrible existence. As if it couldn't get much worse, Ophelia gets caught feeding the mandrake, and her mother scolds her for her obsession with fairy tales and magic, that she needs to learn that life is cruel. She burns the mandrake, which in turn kills her. They're able to save the baby, but Ophelia is now more alone than ever, and she's no longer safe from the captain. Now, while all of this was going on, there's two characters I haven't really talked about yet. One is Mercedes, who plays a housekeeper for the captain. She's a spy, and her brother is leading the local rebellion. She becomes a bit of a friend and a protector for Ophelia. And Ophelia knows her secret, but doesn't want anything bad to happen to her. She has one other man on the inside, the doctor, who is stationed there to assist with the childbirth. Both of these characters are going to have their own choices to make that follow the exact same themes of loyalty, disobedience, and of course, doing the right thing. As the rebels start attacking the base, Ophelia is given one last chance for freedom. She needs to fetch her baby brother, and with the knife, she must meet the faun in the labyrinth. It wasn't already bad enough that the captain lost his wife, but then he gets his mouth sliced open, and then he gets poisoned by Ophelia, who then steals his son. And you don't feel the least bit bad for him either, because he's the absolute worst. He's honestly one of the scariest movie villains I've ever seen. He is able to follow Ophelia into the labyrinth, and when she refuses to spill her innocent brother's blood to open the portal, the faun disappears. The captain then shoots her, and Ophelia dies just before justice is served to him. And Ophelia, in death, wanders through the entrance of her palace and is reunited with her family. And they all live happily ever after. Now, whether or not any of this is real is pretty much up to the viewer. With the general tone of this movie, it wouldn't be shocking at all if it was supposed to be imaginary. It's all just a form of escapism for Ophelia, but that's super depressing and not very fun. Pan's Labyrinth is an incredible, yet exhausting watch. It's extremely gripping, and with Del Toro's masterful direction, it's just as magical as it is horrifying. Visually, it has some imagery that you'll probably never forget, but it is a very dark movie, literally and figuratively. The musical score is hauntingly beautiful. The performances are excellent, and everything, from the pacing to the camera movement, everything is top-notch. He made a fairy tale story that is the opposite of escapism, rooted in the ways of those old, cruel, grim tales. And it's profound, it's bloody, and it's upsetting. A story with lessons and morals, and most importantly, consequences. This movie is truly one of a kind, and like with a real labyrinth, once you've entered, it's really hard not to get lost inside.